We have all heard the legend of Genghis Khan, the horseman who rose out of the steppes, the master strategist who bound a patchwork of tribes into one vast force and rode at their head to create the largest contiguous empire the world has ever known. From the breakers of the Pacific to the cold gates of Vienna, his name thundered. Statues cast him in bronze. Chronicles called him a genius of war. But those gleaming images, polished over centuries, hide the darker mechanism that powered his rise. The empire was not only hammered out in the smoke of battles, but shaped by a colder, deeper arithmetic. He treated people as raw material, measured, culled, and absorbed. His system rested not only on cavalry charges and siege engines, but on terror, enforced reproduction, and a ruthless control over human bodies. What is less often spoken of is how sexual politics and deliberate cruelty fused into the Mongol war machine, how private codes ruled the daily lives of soldiers and women alike, and how conquest was not merely territorial but biological. To uncover that hidden architecture, one must look past the myths and into the surviving records, the secret history of the Mongols, the Persian chronicles of Rashid al-Din, and the eyewitness accounts of envoys like John of Plano Carpini. These sources describe a leader who understood that empires are not cemented by arrows alone. They are sealed with marriages, bloodlines, the eradication of rivals, and the remorseless reshaping of entire peoples. Long before he bore the title of Khan, Temujin had tested the formula. His hatred for the Tatars burned deep. They had poisoned his father, Yasugei, leaving his family destitute and hunted. By 1202, Temujin was no longer a starving orphan but a rising warlord. When the Tatars were finally cornered, he gave an order that would echo through the centuries. Every male taller than the pin of a wagon axle, 3 feet at most, was to be executed on the spot. Picture the scene: a boy dragged forward, forced to stand against the wheel while a guard measured his height. If his head rose above the iron hub, a single glance condemned him. There was no trial, no delay. The massacre swept away thousands. The women were spared, but not spared out of mercy. They were divided among Temujin's commanders, folded into their households as spoils. The most striking and noble were taken as wives or concubines. Temujin himself selected 2 Tatar sisters, Isue and Yisujin, to join his camp. This was not passion, nor vengeance, it was calculated statecraft. The male line was annihilated, the female was absorbed. The Tatar name would vanish in a single generation, drowned in Mongol blood. The method was repeated again and again. Years before, the Merkits had raided Temujin's camp and stolen his young wife, Borte, a humiliation that burned in him without end. When at last his armies shattered the Merkit clan, the widow of their chief, Torajin, was seized. Years later, she would serve as regent of the entire empire, wielding power over generals and princes alike. The Karaits, once allies, later rivals, met the same fate. After crushing them in 1203, Genghis married the brilliant Sorgatani Beki into his family, giving her to his youngest son, Talyui. From that union came 4 grandsons who would rule across Asia: Monk, Kublai, Hulagu, Erik Bok. A single marriage seeded dynasties that governed China, Persia, and the Mongol heartland. The pattern was as stark as it was effective: conquer, kill the men, take the women, steal the future. By absorbing women and annihilating their men, Genghis ensured there would be no rival elite to challenge him. Bloodlines themselves were his weapons. The womb became as important as the sword. But slaughter and absorption were only one pillar of the empire. To hold a dominion that stretched over half the known world, Genghis required something that reached into every tent, every camp, every household: a law of iron. In 1206, on the banks of the Onan River, a grand Kurultai of the tribes acclaimed him as Genghis Khan. Along with his new title, he unveiled a code of decrees called the Yasa. It was no open law, carved on stone or read aloud in public squares. It was secret, known only to the Khan and his princes, but its punishments were visible to all. The Yasa bound nomad and noble alike. Adultery was punished by death, whether peasant or prince, man or woman. A man could have many wives, he could keep concubines, but to even approach another man's spouse was a capital crime. Lovers discovered together faced the same fate, no matter how willing, no chance of pardon. The Yasa's grip extended from the yurt of a herdsman to the court of the queens, enveloping the empire in a net of secrecy and fear. Its reach went further still. Sodomy, desertion, cowardice, theft, all carried death. A rider who failed to pick up an item dropped by the man ahead could be executed. Relieving oneself in a river, or washing clothes in running water during a march, could bring the same punishment. To outsiders, these seemed senseless cruelties. To the Mongols, they were survival. A polluted stream could destroy an army faster than an enemy's sword. A careless soldier endangered thousands. Punishments were immediate, inescapable. The Yasa was the code of a war machine, molding men into weapons through fear. From bedroom to battlefield, every act was scripted. The empire extended not just through armies, but through the immense moving palace of the Khan's household. At its height, 4 principal wives presided as queens, each with her own ordo, palaces on the move, cities of felt and silk rolling across the plains. These were not mere camps, but mobile capitals swollen with trade and politics. Persian historian Rashid al-Din described them as self-contained economies, vast lands, thousands of attendants, herds of sheep, horses, and camels beyond counting. Borte, his first wife, stood as senior queen, but she shared rank with others, the Tatar sisters, and a Merkit consort. Beneath them stretched dozens of lesser wives and hundreds of concubines, sometimes arranged in units of 40. By his final years, Genghis is believed to have commanded a retinue of nearly 500 women. Far from idle, these women advised on policy, commanded networks of influence, and above all, bore heirs. The Ordos were nurseries of empire, crucibles where succession was forged. Borte's 4 sons, Joki, Shagatai, Ogidii, and Talyui, would inherit dominion stretching from the Caspian to the Pacific. When Genghis died in 1227, his chosen heir, Ogidii, inherited not only armies and wealth but also part of his father's harem. This was levirate marriage, an old steppe custom raised to imperial scale. To Europeans, it was monstrous. Franciscan envoy John of Plano Carpini reported with shock that a man might inherit all his father's wives except his own mother. Widows came with livestock, attendants, and political weight, and to release them outside the clan was to leak power. So they remained, property of the bloodline, passed from father to son. Thus, marriage became another weapon. Women of fallen dynasties were consumed into the Mongol order, their children raised as heirs of the Khan. Through levirate marriage, even widows became assets locked inside the ruling line. And when defiance arose, terror followed. In 1219, the Khwarezmian Shah insulted Mongol envoys, killing one and humiliating the others. Genghis answered not with a mere campaign but with devastation. Cities like Bokhara, Samarkand, and Nishapur were erased. Artisans and scribes were spared and sent to Mongolia. The young women were divided among soldiers. The rest, old, infirm, unskilled, were slaughtered. Contemporary chroniclers described mass rapes carried out in plain sight, humiliation staged to shatter resistance forever. At Nishapur in 1221, when Genghis's son-in-law was killed by an arrow, his daughter demanded vengeance. Her order, every living thing destroyed. Chroniclers wrote that even dogs and cats were slain, their skulls piled into grotesque towers. Numbers in the millions may be exaggerated, but they testify to the scale of destruction. The message was clear: resist, and be erased from the earth. This cycle, conquest, absorption, reproduction, consolidation, was the hidden machinery behind the Mongol explosion. Cities burned. Peoples vanished. Women were folded into the Khan's bloodline. The Yasa's iron grip forged soldiers into disciplined weapons. The Ordos produced heirs who inherited wives and wealth through levirate marriage. The machine turned endlessly, feeding itself with blood and fear. Centuries have passed. Cities destroyed by the Mongols rose again. The Yasa has vanished into legend. The Ordos no longer roll across the steppe. But something endured, silent and invisible. In 2003, geneticists uncovered it. A single Y chromosome lineage spread across Asia, carried by 16 million living men. The trail led back to a single ancestor who lived in Mongolia 1,000 years ago. No record names him. Yet who else could it be? Only one man wielded the reach and reproductive system to leave such an imprint, Genghis Khan. His chronicles survive in ink. His palaces have rotted to dust. But in the veins of millions, his blood still rides. Cities fall. Archives burn. Statues crumble. But genes endure. Hidden inside humanity itself lies Genghis Khan's last dominion, not carved in stone or claimed on parchment, but encoded in living flesh, a legacy as vast, brutal, and enduring as the steppe he once ruled.